The Asterisk War is fucking shit. By now, I've heard enough and experienced enough to know that whenever I see the combination of A1 pictures and light novel, the appropriate reaction should be Jesus God! And really, how could it not be? The title poster of Asterisk War itself is highly indicative of what the show is all about, as the only male it prominently displays is the main character, with the only two other males having the smallest portions of the graphic. The rest of the poster is dominated by women who I thought would all be a part of the main character's harem. As it turns out, this is actually his sister. But if light novels and A1 have taught us anything, this being his sister means nothing. By the way, this guy's name is seriously Lester McPhail. Lester McPhail. I just have to... Yeah, his name is Lester McPhail. After analyzing this boring generic poster and browsing through the boring generic fan service written art used to promote the series, I seriously contemplated not reviewing this because it'd just be a retread of almost every harem series I've reviewed. It wasn't until I finished the first episode that I realized the true nature of this show and what a huge goldmine of shit I'd actually come across. The Asterisk War is an anime set in a world where a global disaster, referred to as Inversia, gave way to a new species of humans with superpowers. Teenagers with these powers go to academies where students participate in battle entertainment tournaments called festas. This information is given to us in literally 1 minute and 15 seconds in the form of an info dump because the anime is totally clueless about how to handle exposition. More on this later. Our main character's name is Ayato Amigiri, and he comes to Asterisk Academy to find his sister and to find out what he's supposed to do in life. Once at the academy, he meets Julius Alexa Van Rysfeld, Claudia Enfield, Toto Kirin, Lester McPhail, and he reunites with a childhood friend of his named Sasami Asaya. People with powers in this universe are called Genestella, and wield weapons called Lux, which they use to fight with. You'd think that with a semi-interesting sci-fi backstory and foundation, that the Asterisk War may try to do something different with its narrative. But it doesn't, and that's where our problems begin. The Asterisk War is a terribly generic harem disguised as a sci-fi battle anime that follows every single beat as something like Rail Wars.
We have our first specimen of the harem protagonist species in his natural environment. As you can see,
The harem protagonist gives off the harem pheromones.
Concepts and ideas are either never explained or explained with one solid chunk of exposition and then never mentioned again. You remember how the disaster called Inversia changed the world? No one in the anime ever so much as mentions this because it doesn't matter. And this world, it doesn't matter either. The only thing that matters here is non-stop pandering to an audience that wants to insert itself into the role of the hero as he gets all the women and becomes the strongest person in the series. Which is why Ayato has practically no personality whatsoever and is probably the worst protagonist I've ever seen in an anime. Yes, even worse than him. But we'll talk about that situation later. Right now, let's focus on how Asterisk War manages to expose itself as garbage in the first 10 minutes of its first episode. Episode 1 begins with a flashback of Ayato's sister Haruka competing against a masked man in a fight that no one could possibly give a fuck about because there's zero context. After some horrible fight choreography, she loses and is presumably dead. In present time, Ayato arrives at Asterisk Academy and immediately sees the main female character, Julius, undressing as he tries to give her back her handkerchief that flew out of her window. What proceeds next is something I've never seen in my life. Julius, a tsundere, goes from soon to dere to soon in the span of 1 minute. Cold, caring, and back to cold. Julius then blows up her own room and challenges Ayato to a duel. Nearby students gather around to see the action. In this duel, Julius throws one of her strongest attacks at Ayato and remarks that a normal student would have been finished by now. She throws another large attack of hers, and even before she springs her secret trap, Ayato runs full force at it. She explodes the ball, and Ayato is engulfed in it. He emerges from the explosion and tells Julius to get down as an arrow flies by, aimed to kill Julius. Once they see it and try getting up, Ayato realizes that he has his hand on Julius's boob. They get up, and then we get this shot of her ass. All of that happens in the first 10 minutes of episode 1. Now, what does all of this tell us? Oh boy. First off, the flashback sequence with the shitty fight choreography tells us that the direction in the series is just terrible. The scene is supposed to highlight an important event that will likely be referenced to later, but it could easily be confused as a fodder fight, as this guy's design doesn't even look like it had 3 seconds of thought put into it. The way they swing their swords is nonsensical, and the sound design on these things actually annoyed me, but we'll save that rant for a little bit later. The scene with Ayato and Julius establishes that this is going to be fanservice ridden. Fanservice is not inherently bad, but the way the anime blows its load so early tells us that it'll be used as a crutch. Fanservice will only make sense within the context of the story because characters will be placed in absurd situations that lead to context-specific fanservice scenes that tend to mess with the plot or just make characters look stupid. Julius switching personality so rapidly throws all relation to her from a potential audience member out the window because the only people who act like this are fucking crazy. Only crazy people and idiots let off gigantic explosions in their rooms for no sensible reason. And this explosion actually sets off a large chain of inconsistencies within powers that the anime never bothers explaining because it fucking sucks. The duel exposes 2 problems that will soon plague the anime. The first being the strange hologram things that the students use to record the fight. Asterisk War never explains how any of this shit works, so they tend to just pull things out of their asses, and even then it doesn't remain consistent. They'll have these holograms that can seemingly be used for all purposes, including archiving, but they still have people signing papers. At one point, a character even whips out a scouter to tell Nappa what Goku's power level is. The second problem is how the anime treats Ayato in this fight. Julius is the 5th strongest fighter at Asterisk Academy, and Ayato more or less makes her out to look weak by comparison. He literally runs into her big attack, gets engulfed in the explosion, and comes out unscathed. Ayato is already ridiculously strong in episode 1, which kills any tension that could occur in a fight and tells us that he's going to be a shit protagonist for the target audience to project itself on, which will later become an even bigger issue. The arrows Ayato saved Julius from were meant to kill her, meaning that someone is trying to assassinate her. You'd think this would be a big deal, but the anime pretends like it doesn't care and doesn't reference a student nearly being assassinated until much later. And you remember how I said that fan service would be used as a crutch? Well, there you go. And through all this, I haven't mentioned the large info dump between the beginning fight scene and introduction of Ayato, where the anime dumps all the relevant information of the world on us in the most shitty and least original way possible. All of what I just mentioned takes place in the first 10 minutes of episode 1, where it would take most shitty series a few or several episodes to cover all of this stupidity. And of course, the Asterisk War only gets worse from there. Flat and stupid characters pop up all over the place, certain plot points make no sense, women fall in love with Ayato for literally no reason, world and damage inconsistencies become more relevant, and the fanfiction writing takes over and becomes unbearable. I'll list an example of each before moving on to the topic of awful sound design. Examples of flat and stupid characters would include, but not be limited to, Kirin and Saya. Saya is arguably worse because she has less of a reason to exist. She's a childhood friend of Ayato's who is immediately in love with him from the second she pops up. The anime doesn't explain any of this or even imply that she likes him before showing up. She's just there and loves him. In sharp contrast, at least the anime tries to build up Kirin and Ayato's relationship, but not well, mostly due to the shitty direction. Kirin is also the first girl to get a pat on the head from Ayato, and then all the other girls become jealous that she's being petted like a dog, so they want to be petted on the head as well. Plot point not making any sense is perfectly encapsulated in episode 4, where the person who is trying to assassinate Julius is revealed. His name is Silas Norman, and he's been hired by another school to make Julius drop out of the upcoming festa. Among the many reasons that this entire scene is nonsense is the type of weapons that Silas used to try and kill Julius before he was revealed as her attacker. He and his army of decoys used these shitty arrows time and time again, but when they finally come face to face with Julius, they have multiple guns, some of which have scopes. Why didn't they use this high-powered rifle with a scope to blow Julius's fucking brains out? Because arrows were clearly the better weapon. Except they don't even use the arrows in the fight with Julius. Beyond the weaponry, this plan also doesn't make any sense either, and this character existing at all is just dumb to begin with. Claudia is the second female that Ayato meets at Asterisk, and within 5 minutes, she is all over him. And this isn't a one-scene thing either. She fights the other harem members for him later on in the series. World and damage inconsistencies show up all over the place, but what I find insulting is how the world itself is somehow more damaging than the powers of the characters. Julius blows up her own room and nothing happens. Ayato walks through an explosion and his clothes aren't even singed, but a rock falls on this character and she is crushed. There's also a scene where Saya blows up a large fountain with her grenade launcher, and one of Silas's decoys is hit point blank, but it shrugs off the attack like nothing happened and runs off. This raises the question of why, if the fountain was destroyed, was this guy not destroyed? And why is Julius's room not destroyed, yet she can destroy Silas's decoys with her fire? Good luck trying to figure out all this bullshit. Finally, the fanfiction-esque writing in the series is horrible. I mean, one of the episodes is actually named The Tyrant Vampire Princess. If it wasn't bad enough that this was a terribly written harem, it's also an even worse written power fantasy revolving around Ayato. As I mentioned previously, In the first episode, he's pretty much already beat the number 5 ranked student at Asterisk, and by episode 7, he's ranked number 1. Ayato is actually so strong that his powers had to be nerfed as a child. They should be his only weakness, but they're only played up like that a single time, and then every other time he fights, he does so within the boundaries of his limits and wins anyways. Because of nonsensical writing like this, Ayato's character is nigh infallible and also gets all the women. In one scene, Claudia basically offers to have sex with him and he runs away like a coward. It was at this point that I realized something very horrific. I actually missed Kirito. Despite everything I've had to say about this character, at least Kirito had some sort of a personality about him, even if it did come across as a disorder. Kirito also got laid, and when around Asuna, acted like an actual human being. Ayato is none of this, because Ayato is complete fantasy. His character is what you get when you mix the generic harem protagonist with the generic light novel protagonist. The result is someone who does not behave or act in any consistent form, yet is written into situations where one side, be it light novel or harem, would have to act accordingly, but doesn't. This scene where Ayato refuses sex from Claudia is the harem protagonist side of him, and later in the episode, the light novel protagonist side of him shows up after being triggered by Lester talking shit to Julius. It'd be nice if the series understood its own characters and how they belong to their worlds, but the Asterisk War clearly does not. Let's get on to that rant about the sound design now. The weapons used in Asterisk War are generally uninspired to begin with, but their sound design proves how lazy this entire production was and how shitty the direction in the series is. What do these weapons sound like? If you guessed
a Jedi's weapon,
you're obviously correct. That's right, these things are fucking lightsabers. Now, I understand that laser swords in general will always be compared to the lightsaber in one way or another, and that it's now somewhat inevitable to have a laser sword not sound like this, but this isn't really what pisses me off. What had me facepalming was that the sound design does not even remain consistent throughout the series. In the first episode, they sound exactly like lightsabers, and in most other episodes, the sound ranges from a deeper tone to something that sounds like it contracted a serious disease. For a series to blatantly rip off sound design and then not even manage to keep it consistent is fucking pathetic. And all of this wraps back around to the terrible direction in the series. I remarked a while back that Chaos Dragon was the worst directed series I'd ever seen, and the Asterisk War had me seriously questioning whether or not it really was. The answer ultimately is yes. Chaos Dragon's direction was worse, but the direction in this anime is still fucking horse shit. Do you think the suspects will be caught?
Aren't they dead? They stood around and talked, and now they're talking about we're gonna catch the suspects. What's with this direction?
Some examples would include the scene where Saya blows up the fountain when attacking a decoy of Silas's. She shoots the fountain, it blows up, then it immediately cuts back to them, and then they go into a scene with Ayato, and the anime never cuts back to the fountain because it has to show us fan service.
How did that just become undone? Literally, one of them, the blue-haired chick, she didn't even move. She whipped out a freaking grenade launcher.
The
And
rain
you're just like,
made
yep.
it happen.
So we have no clue what the fuck even happened. It's only afterwards that they bother cluing the audience in on what the situation is. Keep in mind, these people are trying to assassinate students in the academy, and this plot point seemingly didn't matter enough to the director to cut back and show us the assailant running or even the fountain at all. Another good example would be the scene where Julius confronts Silas and gets her ass kicked. Ayato shows up for a last-minute save, and then they go to a floor above where Silas is. Then they proceed to have a minute-long conversation while Silas patiently waits below with his army of soldiers.
Look at how long
Yeah.
they're going.
Yeah, it's like they're stopping to have a monologue. What is that guy doing? The best example of the fucking trash direction in this series is how the series does a certain type of shot in episode 7. Clearly, in anime, there is no real camera filming anything. Therefore, there isn't a tripod keeping all of the shots stationary, but they are anyways because that's just the way it's presented to us. In this scene, where Kieran's comically evil uncle enters the room, the camera starts shaking as if there was actually a camera and they had switched to handheld. This decision boggled my mind so much that I thought I would instantly drop dead. How the fuck does this make any sense? And why is this technique being used for this scene? They never do it for any of the fights, and they just do it for this one isolated scene. What the fuck is even going on here? I'll tell you what's going on. Not a goddamn thing. There isn't anything going on in this anime except the exploitation of a certain audience to such a degree that key elements of a story, such as characters and plot, seem to have fallen by the wayside. I'm sorry if this review is scattershot, but all the problems in the anime are intertwined into other problems to such a high level that it would be impossible to cover them all in a coherent manner without making this video multiple parts with sections designated to certain problems like what Digibro has done. When I saw that his coverage of this anime was on part 5 and he had only gotten to the second episode, I thought there was no way such length was warranted, until I actually sat down to watch this anime and I concluded that you could assemble a team of competent anime reviewers and they would still take about 5 hours just trying to untangle and explain all of the nonsense in this anime, and that's not even taking into account external issues like the topic of A1 pictures and light novel adaptations in the anime industry. I've concluded that it is unfair to the word garbage to have it be compared to the Asterisk War. The plot, characters, and series direction are horrendous beyond belief. The animation is shoddy and inconsistent. Look at his jaw. What the-
This guy's face is just messed up.
and like contorts in every single shot he's in.
You try to make him look menacing because it's not working.
They haven't done a single shot of him cutting. It's just after him cutting.
Right? It just shows them, like, I guess they
told you,
thought
man,
that
it's
would
shitty
demonstrate his
choreography.
speed.
And the only decent thing to come out of this shit show is the soundtrack by Rasmus Faber, a Swedish DJ who seems to be the only talented individual to have worked on this production. If there was ever anything that deserved this rating, it's this. When even Sword Art Online, despite still being more flawed, has more things going for it and manages to outclass you in certain aspects, you know you have fucked up on a scale that is immeasurable. The first season of the Asterisk War gets the final rating of rest in hiss.
It's as if it's as if they knew that their audience knew that this was a harem, and then they just skipped the beat of it. It's like,
Well, we might as well get this shit over with now. We know what you came here for.
Disbelief,
You know.
people. He's got the harem pheromones. So he gives off this odor which automatically attracts like these females, and it
As you
just turns
see.
into a harem.